Okay, an orchard walk. It is September 1st today, 2013. This is the Jonathan tree that I hacked in half earlier in the year. Got tired of dealing with Jonathan's problems as far as disease and pests. And what I'm going to do is graft this. I've got this limb picked out. I'm going to graft this next spring and cut it off down there just above the graft. And that'll get rid of all this. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to graft it with. Here is a tree that was supposed to be a Jonathan, and it looks like a Red Delicious to me. So we're going to see what these apples taste like this year before I just go off on Red Delicious and say it's not worth eating. We're going to give it a try. I've had fresh Red Delicious down here in southern Indiana that were worth keeping. Not that I grew, but that a local orchard grew. And here's some fruit that was not thinned earlier in the year, and you can see the size of those, how small they are. For reference, there's my finger, there's the apple. Then your fruit. But the Red Delicious looks pretty good this year. A lot of my fruit this year has this, and I believe that's bitter pit. A lot of the fruit does. It was a really bad year for that. And I know calcium sprays, yada yada yada, prevent bitter pit. I think this was a particularly bad year with all of the rain. All of the rain. Well, we went about 5 weeks without any rain until last night. We got 3.5 inches, and you can see just how wet the ground is. And that is a blessing. That was a tremendous blessing. And there's more on the horizon. It's thundering out there right now, and it's coming this direction, I think. The Golden Delicious tree, a pretty good crop on this tree. These apples are rusted somewhat, just a bit. A little bit of sooty blotch and a little fly speck. I didn't keep fungicides on them right up to the bitter end. Pretty good rusting on what was out here in the full sun. And then the cedar apple rust, you can see how it's matured here. And on the underside of the tree, you can see the fruiting body of the cedar apple rust. Now what that does, my understanding is, it creates spores which will come off and go to the cedar trees. The cedar trees then serve as a host, and then it's right back to the apple trees next spring, and that's how it goes round and round and round. This is a pre-harvest video. These apples aren't quite there yet. I had a Liberty about 4 or 5 days ago, and it was tart, but they're very close to picking. Nice fruits. Liberty has some smaller fruit on it, which I thought I thinned it adequately, but you can see here, that's 4 apples, all of them a pretty good size apple, you know, growing in a pretty short space. Thunder. Liberty's a good looking tree. I can't recommend Liberty enough. I'm still waiting to be impressed with the taste of this apple. Last year was a bust, not because the apple didn't taste good, I just never really got a chance to eat one. There was only a few on the tree. This is its first big crop, and there's a nice size apple there and there and there, and this is a good looking branch right here. So we're going to let these sweeten up, and I'm thinking in the next week or two Liberty will be ready to pick. They're not coming off the tree yet. They're not falling on their own. They would come with a simple twist. I'll try one here in the next day or two and see where they stand. Liberty. Freedom didn't have much fruit on it. I think we've been over that. Freedom was hit hard with bitter pit. There you can see bitter pit. I believe that's bitter pit. Anyway. And most every apple that's on this tree is affected by that, at least somewhat. Probably be good enough to get a few off and cut them up, eat them. Definitely have to look at some calcium sprays for next year. Jonifrey, this is a dwarf Jonifrey tree, and there, it just fell off right in my hand. I had a Jonifrey a few days ago from another tree. It was a good apple. This dwarf tree's been a bear to grow, but that particular apple was pretty good. Here's the McFree. Still have not tasted one of these. It's probably the biggest one on the tree right there. Most are smaller. Most were lost to fire blight. I'm not sure what's going on with that apple. I have no idea what McFree's going to taste like. It's a disease-resistant Macintosh type apple. And these out here on the end of this branch are pretty small. I had a lot of apples that just didn't get very big this year. I can't really explain it. I don't know if that's a pollination issue. It certainly wasn't a moisture issue early on, because we had plenty of moisture. Okay, that's about the gist there. You remember putting out the vertical axis planting perhaps, and these are the wine saps down here, and these have put on a couple foot of growth. Certainly can't complain with any of that. Then as we get down into the Grimes Golden, these trees were a little bit stockier and they've made a little better growth. Hey, this is worth looking at. Now this is the Stark Crimson Gala. I remember I had a little displeasure earlier in the year with these trees when they came in the mail, thinking I paid a lot of money for a tree that didn't have a whole lot going for it. But at the end of this first year, now let's give Stark some credit. These trees look pretty good versus the majority of these trees that I paid considerably less money for. They're all dwarf rootstock. These Stark Crimson Galas outgrew the rest of them. Supreme trees from Starks. Were they worth the money? You know, they're probably 30% larger or better than the majority of the dwarf trees down the line. No fruit on that tree. It's supposed to be a Granny Smith. Okay, this tree's been something of a mystery. It's supposed to be a Harrelson. It's a russeted apple. Don't know, hardly any red on it. It has a lot of problems. That's one of the problems. I don't know if that started as bitter pit, some kind of rot started on there. I took a bite of one the other day that was coming off. Matter of fact, look at this one. This came right off of my hand. Take a bite of that apple. Bite it on the good side, right here. It's good. About the only bite I'm going to get off of it, but it's good. You can see even the core browning. So, chickens probably pecked holes in that. I mean, look at that apple. Is that a Harrelson apple? So, I may be grafting this dwarf tree over in all my spare time. This tree's not with this. Down here to the lower end of the orchard, this space here will hopefully be filled up by next summer. These trees aren't producing predominantly. There is a Jonifrey way down there. He is. I picked an apple and put it right on top of the stake yesterday, and I never went back and got it. But basically all these trees are fruitless this year. Major pecan. Many of you can remember the Monty Merton 111 trees I got in this year from Century Farm Orchard, and they have done fantastic out here on this hill. They have grown really well. If you look, starting right here, I guess some 2.5 feet on the central leader, and all of the additional branching. I'm really happy with how these trees have grown. They've gotten their leaders out of deer browsing height. Can't ask for much more than that. And then on this side, hear the thunder. On this side, some eating varieties, some black twig from here all the way down. Those are all new plantings as well. They've done good. Would anticipate fruit on there in the next 3 to 4 years. This Smith's cider, I think it had an apple or two on it this year. Next year should be a good year for Smith's cider. And then Granny Winkle. Granny Winkle had some fruit on it. Looked like Bitter Pit. Kind of took care of them as well. So that's, if you look over here at the far hillside, that's pecan trees, chestnut, and way up at the top, some walnut. Carpathian walnut, that's a pecan. And, there's one. Anyway, this is the far end of the orchard. This is where my deer come out of. I haven't had much of a deer problem this year. Very happy about that. They've moved on to the soybeans across the road. Black twig makes some really good growth. You know, that's a really stout stem right there. It's 2 foot of growth on the central leader, as well as this side branch. These laterals. Good job, black twig. Black twig's a southern apple. Southern apple that should do just fine in southern Indiana. Okay, this is the future of the orchard. These 2 rows of Molly Merton 111s. Royal Limber Twigs, 5. Virginia Beauties down on the end, 5. 6 black twigs here. And then some cider apples, and well, I think we got a golden russet down there and a gold rush apple. Pears, nothing this year. Next year could be our year. Moon Glow had some blight on it. It's supposed to be blight resistant. Not here. Keep prepared. Next year's our year for the pears. Okay. Thanks for watching. Heading up here to the tall spindle for the pre-harvest apple video. We are very close to harvesting more apples. Here, this is my last Belle de Boscoupe apple. The only apple on this tree at this point, September 1st. Hopefully it'll be around when it's ready to eat. Here's Crimson Crisp on the tall spindle. It's a pretty apple. I ate one today. I don't know if it's ready or not. To me, it was a good apple. It's got a bit of a sour taste at the start, very crisp, and then it turns over to sweet. So I don't know if that's what these are supposed to taste like. I'm going to leave them on the tree. I figure pull one off every couple of days until I maybe determine something else. Let's see, we got a hole right there. Looks like Bitter Pit kind of hit Crimson Crisp a little bit. These apples were bug bitten really hard early in the year. My sprays were inadequate. It's a pretty apple. See, there's some russeting coming down off of the top. This Crimson Crisp. I guess it's a precocious tree. You can see these apples up here just absolutely hammered by insects earlier in the year. Not sure how all that started. There's a pear right there and here. Huh, that's pretty. And it's a good tasting apple. Crimson Crisp. I've got 1 or 2 Johnny Golds here. Of course, this one never be large enough to be concerned with. I might get this Johnny Gold apple off of here. Never count your apples before they're in the basket. This is the Ginger Gold tree. Ginger Gold did make a good crop this year. I like Ginger Gold. Okay, this is my my fruit cocktail apple tree, except for it's all apples. Down these lower branches are Freedom, and they're large apples. But again, they've got bitter pit, just like the ones out on the Freedom tree. Look how big that apple is. That's filling up the palm of my hand completely. Big apples. Just not many of them. Next year I would imagine there'll be more. Everything else is Golden Delicious. We got the Johnafree branch over there, but they're gone now. This is all Golden Delicious. This branch should have been up here somewhere, but with the weight of these apples has drooped down. This branch is laying somewhat on this one. But there you can see some of the problems with the bitter pit. At least I think that's bitter pit. If you got another idea, let me know. Pretty good crop of the Golden Delicious. A lot of russeting on these apples. Doesn't bother me too much, but as a consumer, you may not be real keen on that. They're not quite ready. There was one fell on the ground just the other day and I ate it and it was tart. Not ready. This one's got some yellow here. That kind of tells me it's approaching what I would consider to be ready. Not quite there yet. Looking at this tree as a whole, it's got a pretty good crop of apples on it. Still not sure what we're going to do with it next year. Why? Because of this. That's never good. So I may cut it off right there, do a couple of bark grafts, and I could do, well, I would do something else. I wouldn't do Golden Delicious. Come in there with something like a Crimson Crisp or something of that nature. Okay, last but not least, Hudson's Golden Gem. This is an M26 rootstock. That's bad right there. I've had a woodpecker working things over pretty good, and there's no point in keeping that fruit on the tree. Hopefully some of these, that's a bruise right there, that's soft, it's rotting. It's a good apple there. Good apple there. Hopefully I can get some of these to go. They're not nearly ready yet. I think this is an October apple. Hudson's Golden Gem. First year fruiting. So we'll see how that goes. Yuck. I'm going to leave it on. Just give the wasps and the woodpecker somewhere to go. Anyway, that's a wrap.